Welcome to the What, Why, and How Can I podcast. Thank you guys for joining us today. We're super excited. I'm super excited to be here. We are actually in a hangar today, interviewing a special guest, Eddy. If you guys might hear some noises, some wind, some rattling of these ginormous doors. I wish you guys could be here to see, but you can't, so that's why we brought you guys here, brought ourselves here so we can experience, check out this place. So without further ado, Eddy, welcome to the What, Why, and How Can I podcast, sir. Thank you for making time. Thank you for bringing us here, allowing us to be here to interview you, ask you all these crazy questions. Like we talked before, I always thought this was, and I still do think this is a crazy, awesome job. Working on planes, working on these beautiful machines. But like you said, this is just a glorified car mechanic. I mean, this is definitely more than a car because cars don't fly.
Yeah.
Again,
sure.
Thank you for coming on.
Hey, not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And any way that I could help, expose of some jobs out there that, people might be interested in. But it's definitely a pretty good gig to get into.
Yeah.
Airplanes are different than cars.
Yes.
A lot more regulations, a lot more detail to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think you have, something that what it takes to do something like this.
Okay. So what is it that you actually do here? What is your official title? Let's talk a little bit about just those basics.
So I am considered an aircraft mechanic, technician.
Mm-hmm.
I do lead jobs too sometimes.
Lead jobs meaning?
Lead mechanic.
Okay.
So then you have a crew that you get, you have this airplane that comes in, it needs an annual inspection, and it's got to be done by a certain deadline that your boss or your manager gives you. And yeah.
Okay, so back to what it is you do. Let's start with, the simple thing of like an airplane mechanic schedule. You guys hourly, you guys salary. Is this there's an airplane here that needs to be done, you guys are coming in, or is this a 9 to 5, 7 to whatever type of job?
So it does depend on what gig you get, who you work for, whether you're working for the government in the aviation industry or you're working privately for a private company. Everybody usually varies. Some private companies have you work 24/7. You have shifts around the clock. Some, you have like, I usually work 8 to 4:30 is my shift here, and that's the only shift that we have here. So very fortunate to have that. You get to go home and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it also depends on what you have going on. If you have let's say a family, and then you want to open up a certain schedule, there is other opportunities and flexible schedules that you could search for. But yeah.
Okay, how long have you been employed here, or how long have you been a airplane mechanic?
So airplane mechanic, like actually wrenching, I've been only about like 2 or 3 years, 3 years, about 3 years. But I've been with the company for about 9 years already. I started from basically the bottom. I was kind of interested into it.
Yeah.
I started, my friend was actually working here, and I hit him up. I was like, hey, I'm looking at getting an aviation job and stuff like that. So I actually started for free working here, kind of volunteering.
Yeah.
I was going to school at that time. My school hours were like in the evening, and then I had nothing to do in the morning. So I was like, hey, let me do at least something, let me get my hands on, let me get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
So that's how I started. And sure enough, I got in shortly after. But after that, it was, it was.
Okay, let's talk about like your job specifically. I know, and later we can mention like all the steps. You said you've been wrenching for 2 years. You've been here for 9. So obviously there's a process of growth here.
Yeah.
To become an airplane mechanic. It doesn't happen overnight. But your daily schedule. You come in. I mean, not obviously, because it's not obvious to me, but every airplane has different mechanics, different inspections, different problems. Take us through like a typical day at work.
So typically, you get in at 8. You kind of, if it's a Monday, depending on what airplanes came in, either over the weekend or that morning, airplanes coming in throughout that week. So you get touch bases with your manager, and he tells you what's going on. We have some work coming in or something like that, and it says, okay, we need this inspection done here. This airplane needs this. So he puts me wherever we need to go. And let's say a brand new airplane came in on Monday morning. Okay, let's start opening it up. Let's start getting, you start opening the airplane up, seeing what needs to be done. Overall, you look at parts that need to be ordered, ahead of time, that you could see, if you see a potential problem in a specific area, then you go attack that specific problem first, and then you order parts, and then parts depend on as far as like, how fast the airplane needs to go. So then you order parts if it's ground or overnight, next day and stuff like that. So typically, and then you just start inspecting it, opening panels up, taking interior out, going through an inspection guide provided by the manufacturer. So it's a lot of detail, and you go task by task, accomplish each task by manufacturer standards.
Okay. I don't know if it's a random question, but I've noticed a lot of people have like key lanyards and stuff that say remove before flight. It was like this little era that people were going through. I see none of those tags here.
So
what is that?
The reason you don't see those tags here is because they all have been removed. Typically, you have tied down the prop. If an airplane came in and it needs to be, so the wind doesn't keep blowing it, so the engine doesn't keep turning, they'll tie down the prop, and it'll have lanyards on them, removed before flight. You plug up ducts and stuff like that, removed before flight. It's kind of more for storage. You plug up, moisture areas that could
so it's not really for like in the mechanical shop that you guys do.
Yeah, I mean, we put those on once the airplane is ready to leave. We'll put them on, and put it on the ramp.
Whatever stored for however long it needs to be stored. Okay, so what kind of airplanes do you guys work on here?
So we work on...
Okay, so I know nothing about airplanes, so you might tell me, but also let's talk about the differences between the airplanes that you guys work on.
The people that might be interested in, they might know a little bit about airplanes. We do work on different types. We work on jets. Two main types that we work on is jets and turboprops. At the same time, there's also there's a lot of different types of airplanes. You have King Air, Pilatus, you have Cessna, Beechcraft, Citation. We get Challengers sometimes. So definitely different types, and depending on what the customer uses the airplane for, there's different types.
Okay, what's the difference between all those? So those names mean nothing to me because I don't know what they are. But I in comparison to like cars, how do those compare? So, and what is your favorite one to work on?
So a lot of it is utilization. Like what are they using for? If they're using for a corporate flight, all they need is basically a single door, and they get in, they get somewhere, and they go. Larger cabins will have larger spaces area. Sometimes they have beds inside them for longer trips, and they actually rest for corporate aviation. And at the same time, you have like a Pilatus that I specialize in.
Pilatuses? Yeah,
I specialize. I work the most Pilatuses. I know the most about Pilatuses. So they're very versatile as well. Some people use it for corporate. And they have a large cargo door, and they could just chuck a bunch of skis and stuff like that in the back and go.
Hey, let's go skiing. Let's take my jet.
Dude, that's how it goes. They'll fly, Bay Area to Truckee all the time.
Yeah.
And there's actually a charter going on from Truckee, to Bay Area and back and forth.
Oh, wow.
Taking people, and you could do that. And there's also, we've seen Med Air and stuff like that, medical, transportation that they'll actually toss in like beds and stuff like that and different utilizations.
Okay.
So the airplane that we see behind us is basically a Pilatus PC-12 that, people utilize it for different aspects.
Different things.
Yeah.
Okay, so they can
Same thing like a car. Like if you have like a van and then you have like a sedan. Okay, what do you use a van for? What do you use a sedan for? So different
So
types.
there's some things that are similar about them, but then there's some things that are significantly different.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's gonna be your size of the airplane.
Just
depends what they use
the
it for.
storage, a big trunk or 2 sliding doors because I got a bunch of kids.
And that's where the Pilatus comes in handy. Is like
Okay.
they have a bunch of stuff usually, and they could actually grow to a 8-seater. It's it's a small cabin, but it's very versatile. People use it for different things.
Okay, awesome. So why choose airplane? Was this a dream?
It's a good question.
Was this a dream? Like, hey, you were born like, hey, I want to work with airplanes. Did you want to become a pilot before? Like, how did all this happen?
So my parents, my parents have some friends up in Washington, and every time we visit, one of the guys actually works for Alaska Airlines, and he was a mechanic there. Growing up in high school, I always pursued engineering, and I always liked designing things, and and seeing them come to life, and designing elements on computer CAD program and Autodesk Inventor. Like I love using those programs, and I kind of decided to put the two together: aviation, and you have your engineering side. And I was pursuing aerospace engineering.
Okay.
Shortly after looking at the prereqs, I knew you needed a lot of math. I was going there. But
You could have been working for SpaceX.
could have. I still can.
You still can. That's true.
I still can if I go back to school and get a degree. A lot of those companies require a degree. And so I was pursuing that. Shortly after, I started doing mechanical engineering, kind of stepped it down a little bit. And I figured if you're going to go pursue mechanical engineering, they want a lot of experience and stuff like that. So that's why I decided to start working in the field first. I talked to my counselor. I'd be like, hey, I want to work in the field first to prep me for that. So once I get there, I have experience under my belt, mechanic experience. So he's like, okay, cool. So we have this program, Sacramento City College offers that program to get your A&P license. That'll put you in the field. You start working on airplanes. You start, you start getting experience. I'm like, all right, cool. So let's do that. So I started doing that. Sacramento City College, like I said, they're in McClellan Air Force Base. They do 2-year program. They go through a lot of detail. They teach you a lot. Once you actually get out, you have a really good sense of, what you're doing. And me going into that school, I had nothing. Like, I didn't know what a piston was. I didn't know what a cylinder was. I didn't know how engine functions.
So because
like electricity, like that was all new to me.
And you started here.
Shortly after, so after 6 months, basically, I think a semester in that college, my buddy was going through that school. I told him, I'll be looking for a job. And he was like, we're actually hiring. So that's how I kind of started doing that route.
Okay.
Once I got my A&P, like 2 years, like very detailed. Like I said, I did not know anything. Like my dad told me always, oh, here's a water pump, replace it. I'm like, okay, cool. So I was kind of mechanically inclined. I did stuff. I swapped out engines, stuff like that, but I didn't know like what behind it. I didn't know the systems. I didn't know how it functions, stuff like that. So I really learned a lot in that school. So props to that school, definitely, for sure.
That's awesome.
And ever since I've been ever since I worked here, and then I kind of stuck around here. I really didn't have time to go back to school, to kind of pursue the engineering aspect. We were working a lot of overtime. Later I started with line service, became manager line service, and then because I was going to school and I was like, all right, I really got to finish up and get my AP.
What is line service? Is it line service here?
Line service here at the company. I was doing like detailing airplanes, moving the airplanes around, part of the line maintenance type of deal.
Okay, so you guys don't just fix, you guys also detail, clean, wash, all.
So it's all part of the deal. The main thing, the whole focus is maintaining the airplane, but to present to the customer, nice and clean airplane. You give him, we have a separate department that will go through and clean the airplanes, make it look nice, presentable, make sure that the customer has a good, you don't want to give him a dirty, like, imagine you drop off your car and then you have fingerprints all over the hood and stuff like that. It's like, but when they actually go through and vacuum it, it's like, oh, nice, they vacuumed it.
Okay. So let's
it's about the customer. It's about the customer.
Hey, customer service is key. That's what keeps us alive.
Yeah.
So let's jump back all the way to, say, your first day here, right? You came in here, nothing, and I really want to learn about kind of what you did and all the steps kind of that you learned and to get to airplane mechanic.
So starting like here first day, you got to be interested. You got to be driven. You gotta have a drive to learn. There's a lot to learn. Every day you're learning. I'm still learning. Like, there's so much information out there that you're constantly learning. And you won't memorize everything. And you do want to like have a reference, and the manufacturer puts out references and stuff like that. So you could go back to, and it's not that you go back to every task that you do, you need to have a reference with you. Per FAA, it needs to be within the vicinity.
Okay.
If somebody comes up to you, asks, what are you doing? So I'm doing that task right there. It's
per
on my
FAA.
box.
What is FAA?
FAA is Federal Aviation Administration.
Okay.
So that's basically your administration for all your airplane aviation industry.
Okay.
They regulations per FAA, usually over a period of time, they've built up something that to go by, and they're basically, they'll give you fines if you're doing something incorrectly. So that's,
Okay.
But going back to the first day, like, you got to be driven to learn. And if people see that, they'll kind of keep pushing and give you more tasks. Once you learn more and more, you learn one task. Okay, you learn that task, you move on to the next task. Let's give you this task to learn. So you develop skills and you develop, you learn those tasks. Once you get more knowledge of what the airplane is and those tasks, you become self-sufficient basically.
Okay. So what were some of the first tasks that you were responsible or that you were doing?
You start off with the easy stuff. You start pulling panels. Like, so line service, when I first started with line service, it was more like mopping floors, cleaning, detailing, attention to detail, in the nooks and crevices, smears and stuff like that. That's some more on the line service and detailing aspect. As far as maintenance, you start with the easy stuff, pulling panels,
like panels,
exterior panels,
Okay.
exterior panels for inspection when you're going into a specific area. So you want to open up that area, whether it's the tail, you have panels all in the tail, and then you have panels in the floorboard, and, you pull everything up, so depending on the task will tell you which panels you need to open. Over time, which panels to open, so you don't have to reference that every single time. You just open it up. But the first task is basically opening panels. You can't strip screws. That's where you could mess up. Start stripping screws. So you got to use your best judgment and tools. You got to make sure you have the right tools. Picking the paint out and stuff like that.
So I noticed there's a lot of necessary rules for an airplane mechanic. If we can review those, one of them being when we were kind of walking the shop. Almost every little piece has an extra wire to it. There's all these it's almost like religious things that you do as an airplane mechanic. Let's talk about what are those items?
So yes, so everything has a purpose too behind it. You want to make sure, you got to remember that you're in flight. You're up in the air, a couple thousand feet. If something goes wrong, there's extra steps that are taken to prevent, from bolts loosening. And that's the whole reason behind the safety wire. You safety wire a bolt to a nut or nut to a specific area. So to prevent it from loosening, it might loosen up a little bit because you got to remember you have a lot of vibration when, with air travel and the engine, you have a vibration. So with vibration, they'll tend to loosen up, and there's different aspects within the nuts themselves. Some are lock washers. Some you will have lock nuts. And then if you have like a nut with a castellated nut with, cotter pins as well. There's
okay.
that aspect. You put cotter pins to prevent it from loosening. And so you torque it, you safety it, just that extra precautionary, just so in case it loosens up or stuff like that. So that's the whole purpose behind the detailed aspect.
Okay. So and you mentioned that these things are obviously in the air, so there's extra precautions, extra safety regulations that are taken in place. Um, I mean, what makes you confident? Like, I worked on this plane, this thing is ready to go fly. Like, how does that happen? I'd always be second guessing myself.
Yes, and that's why you have, like, in those inspection guides that you get, you have a mechanic that performs the work, and then you have somebody look behind you.
Okay.
So you have somebody sign. So there's two signatures basically. You did the work, of course you have to know what you're doing, and then somebody behind you that has established a very good let's say maintenance experience will go behind you and look at it. Somebody that knows what they're doing, somebody knows the airplane very well. Maybe you could say somebody that has more experience, but also even somebody that doesn't have more experience, somebody just to get a second set of eyes on what you did. It's like, hey, I did this and this and this. Can you look it over, make sure I did it? So they're like, okay, you're good to go. A lot of that we do on wheel safeties, like when you put your main wheels together. You want to make sure that bolt is there and cotter pinned, and you want to make sure it's safety. You don't want a wheel flying off
land,
and fly.
dude.
Yeah. It could get really bad.
Yeah.
So that's that we always have. It's like, hey, before we put the hubcaps on, before we close it up, we always have somebody go behind us and inspect it to make sure it's per standard.
Okay, so per plane, how many guys are working on a plane? Are you guys in teams? How does that work?
Depends. I mean, depends what the schedule is of the airplane. If it's not leaving if it's not leaving tomorrow, or if it's not urgent, you could have, one or two guys on it. If it's urgent, you could have 3-4 guys. I think for Pilatus, it's not, we've learned that it's not worth it to put more than 3 guys on an airplane, because you start blowing flat rates, you start doing tasks, start overlapping. If you're doing one task, another task overlaps, and you just knock out those 2 tasks at the same time. If you have a lot of guys, one guy is doing one task, put a bunch of time on that, and another guy put a bunch of time on this task. It becomes not efficient after 3 guys, basically.
Okay.
And it depends on the airplane too. If it's a really big airplane, you put one guy on the tail. You put one guy on the interior, you put one guy on the exterior, and you put one guy on the engine.
So and everybody kind of does their own thing.
Everybody does their own thing. Make sure it signs it off, and everybody kind of looks after each other. If somebody new, then you start training them. You show them what to.
Okay, so like if you're working on something and the guy is on the exterior, see something you're doing on the engine and tells you, like, dude, you missed this or that, are you gonna get butthurt, or are you gonna be like, hey, thanks, bro? So
you have to. Everybody's learning. Everybody makes mistakes, and even I make mistakes. So if you mess up, you fess up. You tell them, it's like, hey, I messed up. Or if you break something, stuff like that. But a lot of times like I said, somebody goes behind you and looks it over. So typically an engine, if it's somebody that knows what they're doing, you just let them be. They do their own thing. They know what they're doing. They've done this before. So once they finish the engine, once they actually sign it off, that means that they finished it. And then once that happens, then you have somebody go behind you and look it over. Whether it's, the engine goes to the tail and looks over everything at the tail when he's done, or the tail, once he's done, looks over the engine once he's done. So it's a process. It's a very detailed process, and everything gets looked over twice, and there's secondary systems involved to where you could, to prevent mistakes.
Okay. Have you guys have any issues where an airplane left the shop and something got screwed up, or?
Yes, I mean, like I said, we're mechanics. We're all human, and we do make mistakes. I've had a few instances where I forgot to put in a circuit breaker and for the landing gear, and the airplane left and couldn't put the landing gear up. Well, I cut out the power because we were working in the wheel wells and stuff like that. We were doing tire change, and
You didn't want to get crushed.
Yeah, when we have two guys for safety precautionary, purposes, I pulled the power to the landing gear so it doesn't,
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, cool. So I did that good, but I didn't push it back in when the airplane was down off jacks, and it left, and there was no power. So the guy had to do an emergency landing and, emergency extend the landing gear, and came back, and it was something simple like a circuit breaker.
Yeah.
No big
I mean,
deal.
that's a good mistake. I mean,
you don't want to be too consistent with that either.
No,
so.
definitely you want no mistakes, but I think that's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, even though landing gear is never fun, if it doesn't work, or
it could
properly.
get really bad. We've heard, we kind of, aviation is a small industry, so everybody kind of knows what they're doing across country. Basically, we get customers from Florida, we get customers from all over the nation. Basically, come to us.
Okay.
So it's a very small industry, and you hear a lot. And we've heard, like, there's recently a King Air that we didn't work on, but a King Air went for liftoff. Something happened with the engine, flipped over, went right into a hangar, killed 9 people.
Wow.
8 people.
That's crazy.
Killed 8 people. So, everybody like, did we work on it? Did we work on it?
Yeah.
It's like, what's that tail number? Did we work on it?
Who's responsible for it?
Exactly. And then there's also goes into investigation, what actually happened, and stuff like that.
Right. So say, for example, I hope this never happens, but it's one of the tail numbers that you guys worked on. Does that mean specifically that this shop is responsible for it? Or you got to wait for investigation and see what actually happened?
So you do have to wait a lot of times, some of the times, that there's pilot error. Let's say pilot error, didn't know the system very well. And I think there was an instance that we didn't work on. A Piaggio, there's a secondary system that you have to actually engage to put the landing gear down. And so I think he was either pumping or what he was doing. He didn't put the landing gear down, so he landed with gear up.
On his belly.
On his belly.
Oh, man. What in the world?
When it came down to investigation, there was a pilot error.
Okay.
So you really have to look at the situation that they're in.
Okay, got you. That's freaky, dude.
Yeah, it's very big liability.
Yeah, I bet, man. I bet your insurance is expensive to have something like
and
this.
You have insurances for, accidents that happen, there's insurances for all that.
Okay, so all these planes need to get worked on.
Yes.
You said you have customers from all over the nation. When I think of a car that needs to get worked on, it gets towed to a shop.
Yeah.
Sometimes it drives in there. These planes, if it gets towed, I'm like, it's not like half dead in the sky, barely lands by your shop and fix me.
Right.
How, what kind of customers are you getting?
So you got to remember that there's secondary systems for safety reasons. If, let's say, one system fails, you have a backup system that, that takes over.
So there's 2 planes in one.
Systems. One airplane, but you have secondary. For example, the landing gear. You have a hydraulic power pack that operates to put the landing gear down. Well, what if in an emergency your power pack blows out? So you have a hand pump that you pump to get the landing gear down to be able to land the airplane safely.
Okay.
Also, a lot of times, let's say you're flying in flight, some avionics system goes out. There's a duplicate avionics systems where you have either a channel A, channel B, channel 1, channel 2. You have, your screens. Also, you have multiple screens on it. So if let's say a pilot side goes out, you have a co-pilot side to reference.
Okay. Okay.
So there's secondary systems involved to where they could land safely and get to like a nearest airport. Or let's say if they land safely, well, guess what? It's going to be and something is broken significantly, so they can't fly it. So then we have to go out to that airport and fix the issue to make it airworthy.
Okay, so does every airport have mechanics?
No. So you actually have we'll have our maintenance facility for Pilatus. We're a authorized repair station for a Pilatus.
Okay.
So then what happens is you have a certain mile radius that the Pilatus authorizes service centers. So let's say you broke down between two service centers. Well, one of the two will
Can
come
service.
out. Yeah, can service. They'll come out and they'll maintain they'll fix whatever problem you have.
Okay, so not every airport has mechanics.
No.
So like at a regular airport, you see all these people running around. They're not fixing. Those are just like gasser uppers and like fooder uppers.
Fooder uppers. That's funny. So if you have a small airplane, a lot of times it's for storage and hangar space, and you have little smaller airplanes like piston airplanes that they just maintain. They fly out of there, no big deal. Some, like, I think we're the only maintenance facility here at this airport, so
that's cool.
Yeah. Some facilities, some airports have more than one maintenance facility.
Okay, got you. So are you guys busy around the clock? Always like books are stacked, or how does that work?
We have slow days and we have our ups and downs. Sometimes we're booked, everybody's working overtime. Sometimes we slow down.
Everybody's working regular time.
Yeah, everybody's working regular time.
So, okay, I mean, it's cool. You work on planes, but who in the world owns all these things? I mean, these machines are not cheap. It's not a $150 payment a month.
No, it's not.
I mean, without saying any names, like what kind of people own these things?
We work in general aviation, so a lot of it is private companies, corporate. They're all corporate businesses. Law firms. We have some law firms that they need to get to LA. So it depends on what they do. If they fly nationally a lot and makes sense for them to justify bigger airplanes for a longer range, or you have something like a Pilatus. You'll have Bay Area hops to Truckee hops within that vicinity, kind of. Businesses that have businesses widespread whatever area they serve.
Okay, cool.
They'll usually, if it justifies.
Right. Okay, so you started from the bottom, now you're here.
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Yes, sir. So how, and maybe it works at different, because in different private companies and all this stuff, but like typically, the more you work, you get a raise every year, how does all that process work? Based on, you get like some certain degrees, some certain sign-offs from like a lead mechanic for you to be eligible for a raise or a promotion? How does that work?
So every company is different. Every company is different. Depends on what company you work for. If you work probably like, I don't have too much experience in what other companies do, but I would imagine so. If you're working for a government contract, or there's some other companies like, I don't know, Cal Fire, aviation industry, or whatever. Those companies might have a set in stone, wages, and
you get to this point, you get this.
Yeah. Some will have a cap. They have brackets that you fall into depending on how much experience you have, and every company is different. So you really have to go talk to the company and see what their base is off.
Okay.
Some are hourly, some are salary, some if you're working for somebody, somebody private, and you're a private mechanic for somebody, for a business owner or something like that. So they'll pay you salary. I know that. Sometimes they'll pay you hourly. So it depends. Every gig is different. So you really have to look at.
So I'm a viewer or listener. I'm like, dude, Eddy has the best job in the world. Eddy, how do I get this job? Like, where do I start? What do I need to expose myself to? Who do I talk to? What can I do? I want this job. I want to go talk to somebody on Monday. So
if you're trying to get into aviation, you want to become an aircraft mechanic, some companies hire without an A&P license. You basically, they train you. A&P is your airframe and power plant license, mechanic, maintenance license. So like I said, Sacramento City College offers that course, and they teach you basically everything you need to know about to get your foot in the door. If you get your A&P license, you're one step ahead. You could come to a company and say, hey, I have my A&P license. That would be the first step. If you're pursuing this field, A&P license, airframe and power plant would be the first step. Go talk to a counselor in Sacramento City College, get into that class. start learning the systems. Once you get out of that school, you're going to have a really good understanding of airplanes and aviation industry, and you could really get into a
And
good gig.
how long is that school or class? Or
The school is 2 years,
Okay.
and it's a time item. It's not like you could get it done faster. The FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, requires you to have a certain amount of hours. So there's two ways of doing it. Sometimes if you work for a company without an A&P license, you have to work a certain amount of time and build hours, hands-on, in order to go take the exam. Or the secondary option, you could go through a school, and they'll give you the hours, they'll teach you everything you need to do, and then you take your exam. So there's two ways of doing it. You could be in the field already working. You have to find a company that will hire you without the
and you'll
license.
probably get less, obviously.
Because you have no experience and stuff like that.
Right.
So a lot of factors to take into account. But
Okay.
if you're trying to get in, Sacramento City College, A&P school, that's the way to go.
Okay, awesome, dude. Eddy, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for answering all these questions.
Not a problem.
Again, this is super cool. Just to be in the presence of all these things is pretty sweet. I'm sure you're used to it because you're here every day.
Yeah.
But for us, it was a pretty interesting experience. So thank you again, sir.
Not a problem.